Hello everybody, Giselle Grenier here from artplace.ca. In today's video, we're going to be working on a still life painting, and I'm going to be using this Pear photo as my inspiration. And I'll be linking everything in my blog post so you can download the same reference material. We're going to be creating this as a piece of miniature art, and because it's fast, and just kind of want to tie in where, although it's miniature art, you can make it any size you want. I'm going to be focusing on an ATC size, and just because I'm doing a lot of swaps, it just is a great opportunity to show people who are participating in the swap how to create the artwork. Okay, so you can do this at any size you want. For this particular project, I'm going to be working on a piece of packaging, and this is from protein bar packaging. So it starts off like this. You can also use corrugated cardboard as your substrate. Doesn't matter. Just show you when you're preparing surfaces, surfaces for art, whether it's ATCs, bookmarks, postcards, mixed media, it doesn't matter. If you create a lot at once, it saves you a lot of time in the prep part. So just to give you a very, very quick, I pulled out a little handful of some of the pieces I have already prepared. So we're talking, this is just mixed media paper wrapped with tissue. You can use scrapbook paper. This is this is from a demonstration I did. The actual paper was a demonstration I did. And then in another video where you make your own tissue paper, I just wrapped it in that. Same with this. I took some steampunk scrapbook paper, wrapped it in that same tissue paper that I made. Here's a demo from a project that I did. It's in the membership site. Some gelatin prints on the cardboard packaging. Watercolor demonstration I did. Here's some more gelatin prints that I did, again, on cardboard packaging. This is a piece I did from one of the book of backgrounds. This is a demonstration I did showing how to make your own foam stamps. And this is a demonstration I did using gelatos. Watercolor demonstration with plastic wrap. Oh, this belongs in here. There's the same thing here. And this was a demonstration with the same technique as the gelatos, but using acrylics and just watercolor demonstration. So you can, all of these will work out really, really well. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from this to a text print. For the small one, I just used dictionary paper. I'm going to show you some options. I got lucky with this one. I was able to pull out the page that says Pear. And this is from a dictionary I picked up at Value Village that was destined for the bin because it was pretty damaged. When you're doing something small and you're using actual material from, let's say, a dictionary or a magazine, make sure you read what's on there if you're going to be giving it away. So you don't want, bad stuff on there. So if you're working on something much larger, you can tear up the pieces. So nothing really makes sense about, here it says sleeping sickness. It's going to be painted, so it's no big deal. But, just to be aware. Okay? And these ones here, I'm going to be doing still life studies using the same Pear, but in different mediums. So, where do you find all this printed material if you don't have dictionary paper? I found a dictionary page, Alchemy, which I thought was really cool. So I circled that, and that can go for another project specific to a theme. And so you can pick up text from anywhere. And ideally for this type of project, because the Pear is the focal point, we want a relatively light background with the text showing through. Try to find magazine print or anything that's on white paper. So you can use any of this stuff. The text print works out well. I've got my little seed catalog, which also works out well. Now the paper is not white. It's because it's recycled paper, so it's a little bit off-white, but it's fine. Okay. And then my LCBO beer guide, and there's some smaller pieces of text. So here's some green text, which might be a little bit dark, but we can always overlay some gesso on top of that. So this works out well here too. So there's no limit as to what you can use. Newsprint though, newspaper, because it's darker, you would have to overlay as well. Where am I going to put this? You would have to overlay it as well with the gesso, which I'm going to show. So I just took some dictionary paper and I tore it up into pieces. Roll up my sleeves. And to prep this, it's pretty straightforward. This part here is not so much the worrisome part. It's this part here because it's glossy. So depending on the type of paper, your paints may or may not stick to it. To make it safe, I always gesso it regardless. Always, always, always gesso it regardless. And you can use my number 8 Bristle Bright is a little bit big for this, so I can just use a little synthetic brush. And I'm applying it dry. And when you apply it dry, if you're using thinner paper, it's less likely to curl. When you're using really watered down gesso, the water relaxes the paper and sometimes it can curl not the way you want. It's no big deal because you just let it dry. You can even speed up the drying time with a heat gun. But I like using this dry because look at all the nice texture in here. You just gotta make sure you clean your brush right away. And if the gesso happens to dry out in your brush, soaking my brush in 1000 plus stain remover will bring it back to normal. Okay, that's that. And then I would also do the same on the back. And so you can see that the text does show through. You want to make sure it's completely covered. The opacity of what you're painting, so let's say the gesso, it's up to you. So you can apply it very thickly like this for complete opaque coverage, and then you've got a beautiful texture on here, but this will take much longer to dry. So you can apply many light layers or you can apply a thick layer. Let me just cover this up because I want to show you what it looks like when you've got your thick layer dry, because that stuff adds some really nice effects to your background. I have one here. Look at that. All this stuff adds an effect to your piece. You can see, I can see a little bit of the text. What is this? This is produced in Canada. So I don't know what it is. But anyways, so that works out really, really well. So once you have that primed, put that aside. And then you'll end up with, your piece like this. And all we're going to do now is collage the dictionary paper on top with many layers. So with that, it's pretty straightforward. Oh my goodness. So it's pretty straightforward. And I'm going to use the same dirty brush. All I'm going to do is just apply a layer. I'm not going to go through the whole process because it would take long. I've already got the card prepared. So the thin paper, and just put it on, another layer, and I'm using the decoupage matte because I like the finish on that. And you're just going to apply the bits like that, always topping the coat, always adding a top coat of the decoupage medium. That way you can just layer and layer and layer. Now if you're doing this with acrylics and that, you can keep going and no problem. You can just work and work and work. If you're going to be working this in oils, because I'm doing this demonstration for multiple projects using different mediums, so if you're doing this in oils, when we're done the final layer of the collage, which is prepping with a bit of gesso, you need to let it sit for at least 24 hours. Because if you're working with oils, you do not want the underlying layers to be wet because acrylics are flexible because they're like plastic based. So they're flexible. So as things dry, they're not going to crack. Oils are completely opposite, where if your underlying layer is still wet and your top layer is dry, as the underlying layer starts to dry, everything is going to contract and it's going to crack. So just make sure that if you are working in oils that you let your piece dry for at least 24 hours. And I'll explain that when that time comes. Okay, so I'm just, just going on. Okay, and this this decoupage medium I could actually also overlap, and I can just trim it. So this is looking pretty good. You build it up as much as you want. This also adds strength to your substrate. So if you're using very thin scrapbook paper, this also makes it stronger. I can overlap a little bit. That way I can get a nice clean edge. Okay, so we'll put that aside. And when you're done, grab that in. Okay, when you're done, you'll end up with something like that. I just use solid sheets on here because the words, I was very careful to pick the words. Otherwise, you'd look something like that. So nice and thick. So I will use this one here, which says Pear. Okay, and whether you want to wrap the paper all the way around or just do it one-sided is completely up to you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Now, if you're working with acrylics or water-soluble mediums, we can just go ahead and start working, building up the painting. And if you're doing this in oils, though, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of gesso. Okay, actually, I'm going to use a different, no, I'll use this brush. And I'm just going to apply a light layer. We just want to set this back a little bit. I don't want the text to be competing with the pear. So just a little bit. We're applying color on this as well. Okay, so something like that. If you have clear gesso, you can use that as well and just apply that. If you wanted the text to really show through, just use clear gesso and apply that right through. Matte medium works as well. Because with oils, we have to make sure that we have an acrylic base on that. We're going to let that dry, and this gesso part here, if you're working with oils, try to let it dry, like I said before, 24 hours. That way it's properly cured and ready for oil painting. Because we worked with collage and acrylics, it's not really an oil painting. It's going to be a mixed media. But regardless, if you're working with acrylics or water soluble, we're ready to go. So once it's dry, regardless of what medium you're using, once it's dry, the gesso is going to dry. And then we're going to come in and we're going to apply a layer of some type of yellow, your favorite yellow. So you can use like a dark, medium, and a light yellow. We're going to create a diffused type of background. And to make this really easy, which is super great for beginners, is that we're going to work with the colors that are next to each other on the color wheel to create this. But I'm also going to show you using a very, very limited palette. So I'm going old school with my original painting palette. How to get dark greens by using red. So we're going to do a little bit of color theory in that. All right, so I'm going to clean up here, and then we're going to get started with the next layer. Before we go on to applying the color to my surface, it's a little bit damp, so I'm going to let it sit. But I want to talk to you a bit about how we're going to get the drawing onto the piece. You can freestyle it. That's no big deal. But let's say you're working on something a little bit more complex and we want to get an initial sketch on there. A pear is really simple. Think of it like an upside down light bulb. It's really, really simple, or a big teardrop. Very simple to draw. But let's say you want to work with multiple layers of pears. If you want to do something like this or like that and you don't feel comfortable freestyling it, totally fine. You can use the lineless grid system to transfer the drawing to your substrate once it's painted with a yellow. If you want to just do a sketch, I recommend using charcoal because charcoal can be erased and dissolved very easily. And I've got a couple of different things here. You've got vine. You can do vine or willow charcoal in small sticks. I'm going to put that away because it's messy. And you can also get it wood cased. And what I've got here is, this is from Faber-Castell. No, this is Faber-Castell. And I've got two different types. I've got the yellow or the brown case and the black case. And it's in different hardnesses. So we've got a soft and hard, and then I've got a hard and a medium, nice and sharpened. I also have a Primo one, Euro blend, and this one is a B. This one here, the Euro one, I cannot sharpen in my pencil sharpener. It always breaks. So what I do, don't tell Joe I'm using an X-Acto knife or a blade, is I will go old school and sharpen it like this, okay? Very, very carefully and very slowly. And then, I mean, if you've got formal, sanding blocks, that's fine. I just use all his scrap sandpaper, and then you just sharpen the edges like this. And all the pieces that you have here, if you have a little container, you can grab this stuff because you can use this as a powder on your other drawings. Doesn't take much just to get it to a point. Okay, that's it. That's all you need. So I'm going to put that aside. And put that aside. Put that aside. Hide the knife so he doesn't see that I used it. And for the yellow, you can use whatever yellow you want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do is prep it. And you can use thick acrylics, thin acrylics. It doesn't matter because this is just a background. And I'm going to be using the Decor Media Fluid acrylics because they are much thinner and they're a lot more translucent. So I've got Hansa Yellow Light. So with Hansa Yellow Light, I'm also going to bring out a little bit of blue and a little bit of red. So what do we have here? Our primary colors. Use whatever you want. If you have your favorite yellows, use that. But I want to show a little bit of color mixing here because I am getting, email from people wanting to know a little bit more about color mixing because of the vast number of colors out there that it can get quite expensive. And these pigments that I'm using, they're very strong pigments. You don't need a lot. They're also single pigments, so they're very easy to mix up and prepare. And when I say single pigments, is that there's one pigment in here, PR9. Enhanced Yellow Light is PY3, and Ultramarine Blue is PB29. Whereas if you use, there's, let's say green gold, it could be a green, a yellow, a brown, and a white. A whole bunch of different pigments. Using single pigments, things are a little bit more predictable. So to prepare this, let me change up my brush. I want to go to a larger filbert brush rounded on the tips. First thing I want to do is I'm going to start off with my yellow. So I'm going to take my Hansa Yellow Light and I'm just going to paint it a complete layer that's not thick. I want to still be able to see that text through here. And if you're not using text paper, that's fine. That's fine. All right. So on my monitor, this looks actually green. It is a yellow. I can promise you that. Then what I can do is I can take my paper towel and I'm just going to wipe back a little bit of the color. This will also push it into the paper, into the gesso, and you can see where the gesso was a little bit thicker. You've got a variation in here. Very, very pretty. I also didn't quite collage the paper correctly. It's peeling up a little bit. So when the project is finished, when I come to varnish it, I'll make sure that I varnish over the whole thing. Okay, simple. Let's quickly just dry it. It'll only take a second. That's it. When you're painting with acrylics, if you find that it's tacky, you got to dry it, because if it's tacky and if you keep painting it, you'll likely pull up that layer of paint and it'll look ugly. So if we want to create a bit of a darker yellow, so we can take yellow and add a little bit of red to it to make an orange. This is Naphthol Red Light, and then a speck of blue. and it will neutralize it. And what I'm doing is I'm just creating a little bit of contrast, primarily on the right side, like that. And then I can also just take a bit more yellow and overlay it. All right. If you add white, it's just going to create a chalky white. That's all it's going to do. And I made a mistake. I'm darkening it more on the left, not on the right. Keeping it light at the top. Okay. And then we'll come back in here as well. We'll do a little bit of wiping back. And what this is doing now is creating a distress, which is a very nice effect. Not going to worry too much about the left. There. You can see where the gesso was on here. Dry that, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit more yellow, just a speck. I'm going to go right up here where it's really bright, especially on the right side, the center right. This is where our light source is going to be. And so let me just show you. If we add, whoopsie, always shake your acrylics if they're in tubes or in bottles. If I just take a little bit of white, just to show you what's going to happen, it creates a much more opaque finish to your piece. So keep that in mind if you're going to be using white, so you don't see as much of the background, which is fine. I want to cover up this image that was here. Then you can let that, not let that dry, but I'm going to use a heat gun. Rinse my brush. If I come back now with another layer of yellow, I get that brightness back, but the background is more opaque. This is called glazing, when you're applying translucent layers. All right, so that's that. And when this is finished, completely dry, you can go on now and to complete the painting. So I'm using this technique for all the projects, regardless of the medium. So the oil, the water soluble, acrylics, all that stuff. So it's the same technique. If you're using oils, you have to make sure you have a complete layer of acrylics on this as your base to make sure that the oils have something to stick to. So once you're good with that, or if you want to use clear gesso, that's fine. It's got to have some tooth. So don't use a decoupage medium or a gel or whatever that's slick, because the oils won't stick to it. All right, so this is ready to go. The other thing you can use as well, it's a health and safety issue though, is you can use a matte spray. Okay, so you can use an Americana matte spray or Krylon matte spray and just spray your piece. Read the label, health and safety, read the label, and that'll also create a tooth on your piece. All right, I'm gonna let this dry, and now we're gonna go on to sketch the pear and start painting our little miniature art using acrylics. So one of the things that we can do here is make the process at the end when we add the speckles to the pear is we can create a mask. Now what you're going to do, regardless of the size, it doesn't matter, take a piece of paper that's bigger than your substrate, and you're going to kind of align it. So we want the table line to be about a third of the way up. So we'll just place it about here or so. And then you can sketch out the pear, then use small scissors and cut it out. At the very end, what we're going to do is we're going to place this on top of the pear that we painted, and we're going to splatter paint. That way the paint goes on the pear and not on the background. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. You can apply masking tape that's cut out, frisk it, it doesn't matter. You can also apply a layer of medium over the background, splatter, and then just wipe off the paint here because the medium will act as a resist. So either way, if you want to do it this way, so we're just going to lay it out there, and you're going to use a charcoal pencil and You can use graphite as well. Graphite, I find that depending on the pressure, you actually end up gouging the paper. So just, if you're going to use graphite, just be careful. Simple as that. And then we'll get our table line here. Simple. You can also see that I didn't center it. Now, if you happen to have made a mistake, use a baby wipe. And you can erase the charcoal. That's why it's important to use a soft charcoal and not a hard one. And like graphite, you sometimes will end up gouging. I also did it upside down. It needs to go this way. so that's why I had to erase it, because I made a mistake. So you can also tilt it if you want. That's up to you. That's up to you. And I'm using this legal paper, which is semi-transparent. So let me just center this a bit more. And I'm lining it up so where I can see the shadow. And there we go. So if you want to use the mask method, that's what I'm going to be showing, is you can do it this way. Otherwise, just freestyle your pear. And then we have our little table. And then we have our little stem, which I'm going to freestyle. So put that aside. So we're going to let the text show through the background. And for this, let's lay out all our colors. So Hansa yellow, light. I've got, let's see, how am I going to do? Oops, let me go in the proper order. Got yellow oxide. And Naphthol red light. These are all single pigments. Ultramarine blue, which is a blue that's on the violet side. And phthalo green yellow, which is very vibrant. And we all know what happens when I paint with phthalo colors. And burnt sienna, which is a core color in my palette. We of course need white. See how little I'm putting on here? This is even too much. And for the brushes, I've got some filberts, and I've got 2 filberts and 2 rounds, and depending on the size, use the biggest brush you can stand to paint this. Don't use something tiny, otherwise you'll piddle with it. And I've got my one big brush here, which is what I'm going to be using for varnishing at the very end. We have our sketch in there, so I'm going to use my filbert brush, and I'm going to work with white, with Hansa yellow, a little bit of that, and a little bit of yellow oxide, which will make a semi-opaque base. And I'm going to paint that just on top of the charcoal. And when you paint over the charcoal, it's going to dissolve a little bit, and which is fine. I want this to be semi-opaque. I don't want the text to show through to the point where it distracts from the painting. And by choosing, certain greens, you can decide how vibrant you want the pear. Okay. I had to quickly stop there. I sneezed. Okay, sorry about that. And I'm going to hit this with the heat gun. And you can also see a little bit of wrinkle there from the paper, which is fine. So once we have that in there and it's dry, now we're going to start coming in and we're going to start building the piece. So I'm going to go to a smaller filbert, and filbert is rounded, so it makes it really easy to do the round strokes. So I'm going to take a little bit of phthalo green yellow, a little bit of red. Oh, too much red. Speck of blue. And what I'm looking for is just a dark green. Well, I don't know what color that is. What do? We can turn around and... Oh, where's my paper? Where's my paper? Where's my paper? Where's my paper? Oh. And we can make a paint swatch on here. And what this is chromatic black. Nice, eh? So we didn't need to actually have black. And I'm gonna get a little bit of water on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint the bottom side with this. I'm going to wipe out the brush. I'm just going to fade that into the pear. This is going to be more of an impressionistic. We're going to be using a lot of brush strokes and color. So that'll be the base for the shadow. Remember, these paints are more translucent, so you want to work, depending on how you want to work your translucent glazes, you can work dark to light or light to dark. This way, because I know this is the darkest part, I'm going to be working dark to light. And then I'm going to take a little bit of phthalo green, a little bit of yellow, which is really intense. Now I could knock it back with burnt sienna, which is perfect. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. You can take just the primary colors to work together. You can take a secondary color, which is the phthalo green, knock it back with a neutral. You can also take a blue and yellow oxide, which will also work. I'm just going to overlay this a bit, keeping it light. And where it's the darkest, I'm going to go a bit to that dark. This is the darkest part right here. One of the reasons why I'm also working small, first of all, because it's faster, but it's a challenge for me because I went, because of my eyes, the longest time where I wasn't able to work with small pieces. So this is actually, I love doing this, All right, so I'm going to now go in with that same mix. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow, Hansa yellow light, get a much lighter green, and we'll put that, this is the middle tone. And I'm going to overlay that on the entire pear. And if you want to make your pear opaque where you can't see the text, that's fine too. Just remember that the more layers of acrylics that you add, the more opaque it's going to become. Now I'm going to show you something. Yeah, so that's what it was. So when I was painting here, there was a line that developed here, and that was because the paint wasn't dry, and I painted over it and it pulled up. It was tacky. See right here, here's another one. Okay, the paint pulled up. So if this happens to you, just going to take the heat gun, give it a fast dry. That's all you have to do. And then I can go over. Okay. And now to that mixture, I'm going to add more Hansa yellow light. I'm going to come in, paint that. Now one nice thing too is I like sometimes outlining the pieces that I'm doing. If you're using charcoal, you don't need to outline it because it creates a nice dark outline on this. I'm going to take a little bit of white, and I'm just going to put a little bit of white right here. Okay, just to build a little bit of opacity there, because I need to make this much more yellow. So if you find that the paints are too translucent, just pick up a little bit of white, add it in, and then you can glaze a color on top of that. Like that. There we go. So we're working not so much wet on wet now, we're working more wet on dry. So now I can come in with the Hansa yellow light and add a glaze of this color. So the glazes are the transparent layers. And if you're painting and you happen to, by chance, cover all the charcoal outline, that's fine, because we can come in with a graphite pencil or charcoal pencil or even say a liner and we can draw an outline. That's totally fine. With a little bit of yellow oxide. Now, yellow oxide is more opaque. Right in the middle. Just want to soften that shadow a little bit. Okay. And I'm looking. I think I want to lighten up the top a little bit more. Yellow with a speck of white. Just going to pity pad that. Pity pad, that's a painting term, pity pad. Keep it nice and soft. There's a little bit of reflective light right here. So this is a great way to create an actual little piece of artwork that's, you know, it's an original. It's an original, and you get to learn a little bit. Color mixing and color theory and all that stuff. Glaze another layer of yellow. So you see how beautiful this is getting? Now, if you want to create the glazes that are very, very intense, between each layer of paint, add a layer of, let's say, matte medium or a glazing medium. So that layer that I added, I had... Oh, let me now show you about yellow and a blue together to make the green. I added water to that one, so it was just very, very thin. So ultramarine blue enhances the yellow light, also makes a nice green. So now I'm putting in these they're not really dark parts, they're just dark parts, or not shadowed, but just parts of the pear that are a bit rough. And I'm patting those in. Look how beautiful this is looking already. Pad, pad, pad. That's beautiful. Now we have a bit of a harsh line with the shadow here, which I'm not happy with. So I'm going to take a little bit of that shadow mix, put it into this yellow and blue mix. While the brush is still wet, I'm going to pat that as well. Like that. And I want to soften this. I dab the brush on a paper towel, and I'm just going to soften that edge. Dry that. Okay. So I think what I want to do now at this point is I'm going to let that set. I'm going to get my little round brush. And let's go into burnt sienna with roughly an equal amount of ultramarine blue. If you guys have been following me, you know what I'm making here. Chromatic black. If you use more burnt sienna, it's going to become more like a burnt umber. If you use more ultramarine blue, it's going to be more like a Payne's gray. Get a little bit of water in there. Nice little round brush. This is number 2. And I'm going to get a close up here. So I'm just going to paint the stem. See, I'm holding the piece, just using choppy strokes. Okay. And the base of the stem is a little bit bigger. I'm not even looking at the photograph now. This is so easy to freestyle. The top part, though, is larger, because this is the part that comes off the tree. Taking the tip of the brush, popping that in there. There's a bit of a bump here. that. Okay, so you've got the pointed tip. This is the part that's actually stuck to the tree. Okay, so think of a rectangle that's rounded on the ends. And with the dirty brush, I'm going to come in and I'm going to take a little bit of the shadow mix, or I can take a little bit more of the brown. But I like the shadow mix, so you can just even dab into a little bit of phthalo green. And just going to, and I flattened the brush out a little bit, and I'm just going to create a very thin line on the left side, on this side here. I'm going to rinse the brush. Then I'm going to take that same mixture, and I'm going to go in with a little bit of yellow oxide. And I'm going to repeat the same thing. I don't want to get my card to the paint. Now I have a glare, so I can't see what I'm doing here. Let me take a little bit of white in there. I'm looking for something like a sandy color. There we go. Like that. I'm going to go back into this shadow color. I got a glare again. I'm just dabbing that shadow just a bit more closer to the middle. Oh, Mia's starting to growl. Like that. Okay. Pure white. Speck of yellow. Create a little bit of a sunshine color. Just going to hit the side there. And you can also do the same thing on the pear, because the pear now is dry. I'm going to use a larger round brush though. So again, white, a bit of yellow to make like a sunshine color. And depending on the yellow that you're using, you may end up having to add a little bit of water to that. Okay, so I'm flattening out the brush. And nope, that's not opaque enough. Sorry, that's too thin. I added a bit too much water. There we go. And when you're adding a bit of water, you get these little bubbles in there. So you'll see what's going to happen when I dry it. Like that. Whoopsie. So I'm looking at getting it right on this side here. Quickly dry that. And what you end up with is a mottled highlight in there. Take a little bit of yellow. This is a great way to build up the texture. So it's not flat. I like my paintings with color. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow oxide with a bit of blue. Nope, don't like that green. Hence a yellow light with the ultramarine blue and a speck of burnt sienna to knock it down. Gonna do the same thing on the other side. So all I'm doing is I'm just creating these mottled splashes. Splotches. You can use a little round brush for this. It'll take forever. Take a little bit of that shadow color right in here. This is where the pear kind of curls out. And you've got to make sure that your brush is damp, so that way when the paints kind of meld together, if it's dry, it'll be like speckle. Here we go. So that's too pointy. Take the brush and just dab. Okay, so one of the challenges I'm having here is this is really small. There we go. That turned out really well. And so let me look at the photo. Let me look at this. I actually like what I've done. I'm going to take phthalo green, a little bit of yellow, and a little bit of red. You can't see that. What I'm looking for is I'm supposed to do with yellow, blue, and red, not phthalo green. I picked the wrong color. Okay, so something like kind of a browny color. And I'm just going to reinforce the dark. So it's this color is really what I should have made again. When you're brush mixing your colors, you will never get the same mix twice. It just won't happen. Another technique that's really nice for doing this is doing it with a bristle brush. Look how beautiful that looks. So the dark that I'm putting here, I'm going to avoid putting it up here because it'll be way too dark. The other thing is using a mop brush. That's beyond the scope of this project, but you can use a mop brush as well to soften things out. Okay. Now we're going to paint the table, not this table, but the table in the little art piece. And I'm going to use my flat brush for that. And with this, you really can paint it any color you want. I'm just going to paint it a dark yellowy color. Or you can paint it red, which will be really contrasting. Like if you were to take red, that will really make it pop. And actually that is kind of pretty. If it was on a white background, it's not. It's going to be on that. So keep in mind, because this is more translucent, semi-transparent, that you're going to have optical color mixing. So it's going to turn a little bit more orange. But that's not bad. Let's see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? We don't like it, we just change it. I like that red. I'll just dry brush the rest on there. And the pear is sitting quite pointed on the table. I want to flatten that out. Take a little bit of naphthol red with some burnt sienna. And I'm just going to touch more into the pear and more on this side here. And then watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the brush left, right, left, right, left, right to create some interest in there. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that green, phthalo green, right into that color. That'll make it really dark. I have such a glare. Oh, my table's crooked. Fan that out. And I can come in now with just a damp brush and just soften. See what's happening here? The paint wasn't dry. Look, it's coming up. You can try to fix it any way you want. This has to dry. This has to dry. So lesson learned in that one, again, if you find your paint starting to get tacky, You have to let them dry. And take yellow oxide with red. Ugh, I don't like that. That's really, let me show you what that looks like. That's like a peachy color. Don't like that. Let's go back with red and burnt sienna. And now I'm going to take a little bit of Hansa yellow light in there. There we go. So what that's going to give us is that. Much nicer. Blot the brush. And I'll just put a glaze of that over everything. You can take a little bit of white. Remember, you need dark to show light. The problem when you're working with something like this, because the paints are translucent, you can just keep putting paint on top of it and nothing's going to happen. But if you put white on there first and then add the color, it's going to stand right out. Now I just need to straighten that table edge. There we go. Making it really bright on this side here. Like that. And that's a wrinkle in the paper thing. How did Chaos's hair get on there? Okay, let's dry this. So you can see acrylics dry a little bit darker. So we can come in another layer. We're not going to leave it like this, so don't worry. Just want to show you what it looks like. Oh, furnace just came on. Let's bring that right over. I got a little bit of white on the pear. I'm going to use my brush to dampen that, to remove that color. Okay, let's dry that. It's got to be bone dry. Just take a little bit of this color, put that back in there. Okay, I'm going to use my round brush, make sure there's no white in it. Now if I take my Naphthol red light, watch what happens. Because it's translucent, the strokes that we did before show right through. Then you can take a paper towel, blot, dry, and repeat. So it's another great way to create, with my brush, another great way to create an interesting background. And then right in here, just bring it, work it back in. Great way to create interesting backgrounds that, you know, the table really isn't red, but it's just a little piece of art. And I'm going to go in with a little bit of burnt sienna and phthalo green. This is the darkest part here. And the level of detail that you want to put into this is completely up to you. I'm going to tap, tap, tap. I should go with a bigger brush. Again, the bigger the brush, the better. That way it won't take as long. And let me just get a little bit of yellow. I've got a terrible glare. So what we're looking at here is that the pear, when pears, here, there's a divot inside, so pears don't sit flat. They kind of have that hole. Ideally, if you have an actual pear to work from, that would be the best thing to do. But there we go. And then I left a larger part of the bottom because then I can put my quote in there if I was to make an actual ATC. So let me dry this. I'm going to do some speckling, splattering. I need to do a bit of a cleanup here. I'm gonna have to clean all this up. All right. So this is where we're going to use our mask now. Now, if you didn't use the masking template the way that I showed you, you can do whatever you want. But in here, we're going to just put it right about there. Okay, it's a little bit big, no biggie. And I'm going to take, let's see, you can splatter the white, which would be kind of cool, except I'm going to go with, let's see, I am so tempted to use a shimmering white. I am so tempted to use that, a shimmer white. Let me go with a little bit of white. And I want small splats, so I'm going to use a small brush. So nice soupy paint. Take another brush, and I'm just going to tap that. Ferrule on ferrule, metal on metal. Okay. That, I'm going to dry that. Now what we can do, where is that? I'm going to use this part now to kind of simulate this part here. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you as many techniques as I can. And where's my scrap paper? Oh, I don't have scrap paper. Silly, silly, silly me. So if you didn't have that, then you can use it. You can use scrap paper. Don't use kitchen things. Okay, so you can get more splatters on the left, on the right, and then use the other side about like that. If you're going to use masking tape, make sure you use the low tack masking tape, but bits of paper work out better for this. Little bits of paper. And now I'm going to go in with burnt sienna with a touch of blue. Even that's too much paint, which you can't see. I'm off camera. I'm going off camera so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just grabbing some of the blue. Okay, something like that. The smaller the brush, the smaller the splatters. There we go. Oh, I love that. And I got one splatter right here. Right there. No biggie because I'm going to have my quote covering that up. All right. So what do we do now? You can continue to build this if you're creating an actual ATC or whatever you want. I'm going to leave this part here for the quote, which I'll probably stencil Pear. Actually, that's a really good idea. Stencil Pear on there or some type of quote. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a kneadable eraser. I'm just going to make sure I erase any visible charcoal that's there. And then I'm going to give it a coat of varnish. So you can use a kneadable eraser. You can also use a vinyl eraser. And I'm just going to come onto the outside. Make sure there's nothing visible. I'm pretty good on there. Make sure everything is dry. Now, if you wanted to come back in and do an outline on this, that's fine. You can do that with a permanent liner. Yeah, I've got my Staedtler permanent special. This one's a special, completely waterproof, even with solvents. So I'm just going to create some sketchy lines. Very light. That. I can also create using a very light strokes. This goes back to my days of pen and ink. Create some lines in there for the table. And I'm not going to bother here because I can put a quote in there. Not sure I'm going to put there yet. And I'm going to dry it. So I'm going to be using Decor Media Soft Touch Varnish to varnish this. And I'm using this, the brush is too big, but it's the brush that I reserve for all my varnishing. And I used the varnish previously to doing this project. What you want to do is take a popsicle stick and just stir it. Don't shake it. And this is going to give it a very, almost like a velvet feel to it. Making sure I go over the edges. And you can create a very, very soft finish by, very carefully. I'm creating a very rough varnished finish, so I want the brush strokes to show through. See? That's going to dry completely matte. If at all possible, let it dry naturally, not with the heat gun, to make sure that it has time to cure. And unlike me, you want to do the front first, then you want to do the sides, because now I've got varnish all over my hands. Want to make sure I got this corner right here. That's where the paper was peeling. Like that. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. Then we come back. We'll finish the edges and we're done. Now, one thing I'm doing that I could have done before I did the varnishing was to finish the edges. And this is a completely optional. I'm just using a pouncer sponge and I'm just painting the edges. You don't have to do this. And the varnishing part as well, the acrylics are self-sealing. You really don't need to varnish it as well. But if you're creating art for, let's say, the kitchen or a humid area, you should varnish it because that way it's easy to clean. There we go. Now it's finished. So what can you do with this? You can glue it to the front of a card blank. So a piece of cardstock folded in half. You can use that on the front of a card. You can use this as an ETC. You can get tiny little frames for this. Create a collage of different one of these. Mount them onto a canvas for a series. There's so many things you can do. Don't just think of this as like an artist trading card. Think of it as miniature art. And then you're more open to all the different things you can do with it. And I was going to stamp a quote on here. I don't have any stamps that would fit properly, stamps with a face that I like. And unfortunately, Decor doesn't have a stencil with text that's small enough for the word Pear. So I'm kind of stuck. So I'm going to have to look to see what I can do. And you know what? If you don't have a stencil, if you don't have stamps, you're likely watching this on either a tablet, a phone, or a computer, and you probably have a printer. Print something out on paper and then put it there. So quotes that you could use for this could be eating, pear soup. I like pear soup, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing. But you know, different things you can do. If you don't like the contrast of the red, use whatever color you want. Now, once you've created this, let's pretend you have this. You say, I just don't like the red. You can come back with another color. So let's just show you. If I come back in, like that, just to show you with acrylics, it's so flexible. Come back in with the blue. Now I have varnish on this, so I can always wipe it up if I don't like it. You can come in with blue. Now with the red, it's turning purple, remember. Translucent layer. Do you like that better? That's pretty nice. I like that better. But as long as it's translucent, you will see the underlying strokes, which is very important. Keeping it with horizontal strokes. Wiping back a little bit there. There we go. That's so much nicer. And I'm thinking with me, the red, it wasn't the right red. And I can still see all those strokes. So now I can come in, dry that. Acrylics dry darker. If I like it, fine. And then I can go ahead and varnish it, because this varnish you can also use as a ground. So I came in and I thought I want to put something on here, and I couldn't find a stencil small enough. I didn't have a stamp that, you know, I like the face. So I went to my alphabet tiles. These are from Tim Holtz Ideology. And the frustrating part about using these is that I don't know if I got a defective package. There were just a very few letter A's. So I got all different letters, and I can do that. You can also tilt the letters a little bit. So this is a great way that you can actually dry fit the whole thing before actually committing to it. So however you want to do it, you can use a computer to print out a quote on paper, tint the paper, glue it on, use a stamp, whatever you want, or just leave it blank. That's completely up to you. And I will be using these letters just to create this, because formal art as well can have words on it. Or you could have little pieces of wire or something, whatever you want to do. So there you go. So I hope that you enjoyed this project and you got some ideas. And what I'd love for you to do is share your comments below. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That way you don't miss out on anything. Now YouTube, I've heard from people that YouTube isn't sending out notices for new videos. It's sporadic. So what I'd like to do is invite you to subscribe to my email list at artplace.ca, and I will send you updates personally when I release a new project. That way you won't miss out on anything for sure. As well, feel free to share artwork that you've created in my private Facebook group, or send it to me by email. Links to both of those are also on my website at artplace.ca. So again, I really hope that you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for spending time with me while I create this project. So I'm going to clean up, and until I see you next time, stay inspired.